Carlos pays one lump sum to open a savings account and then begins to save $80 each week. Carlos's savings is represented by the graph below. Okay, so A says we need to determine the y-intercept and interpret its meaning within this context. So I'm just going to circle where our y-intercept is located. So B equals 1500, or my y-intercept. And in this context, I can see that 1500 is referring to dollars. And when I have $1,500, he has $1,500, is at 0 weeks. So when Carlos has $1,500, it's 0 weeks. So it's some sort of starting point. It's the amount of money that he's starting with or beginning with. So $1,500 is the amount Carlos begins with. Okay, so now we're going to calculate the slope of the graph and interpret its meaning within the context. Okay, so I know slope is change in y over change in x. So I'm just going to create myself a slope triangle here between two clear points. And remember, I could have done it between any 2 points, but I chose between these because it just was easiest for me to see this. But you could have done slightly different. It doesn't matter. Okay, so it went from 1500 to 1900. I can see the change in my y value is 400. And it went from 0 to 5 weeks. So I can see the change in my x value is 5. So I'm going to write this as change in y over change in x. So 400 over 5. I'm going to simplify this so that it's in its simplest form. So 5 goes into both of these. It goes into 400 80 times, into itself 1. So I can really just simplify it to 80. So what does that mean? Carlos saves $80 per week. And I always tell my students that you should be able to read your slope from the situation. You should be able to figure out what your change in y and change in x is. So Carlos saves tells me that I have a positive slope. So when I'm saving, I know it's positive. The 80 gives me the change in my y. Per week is talking about my x values, because that's what's on my x values, gives me the change in my x, the per. And that tells me 1 when I say per. So 80 over 1, or just $80 per week. So write an equation in slope-intercept form that can be used to calculate how much Carlos has saved after X number of weeks. So I know my y-intercept and I know my slope. So I'm just going to plug that into y equals mx plus b. M is my slope, b is my y-intercept. So I have y equals 80x plus 1500.